St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Bye.
Go on. Okay, bye. Okay, that's enough. Go. Okay, bye. Alright. I hope everyone is having a good Sunday. And we are actually going to finish the book of Ruth. I know I told you all last week that we would just do verses 13 through 17. But we're actually going to go on and finish it. And I have not thought of anything to do for next week. So next week will be a surprise for you and me both. We will figure it out sometime this upcoming week. But we're first going to look at Ruth Chapter 4, verses 13 through 17. We'll talk about those, and then we will read the last verses 18 through 22. So let's start with verse 13. It says, "So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife, and he went into her. And the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the woman said to Naomi, 'Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. He shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him.' Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her lap and became his nurse. And the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, 'A son has been born to Naomi.' They named him Obed. His father was of Jesse, the father of David." So we see the next part of the story. We left off last week not knowing what would happen, but Boaz took Ruth, they got married, and we see here that she started to have children, or at least we know she had one son. In verse 13, we see that Ruth became pregnant. Now, think about this for a minute. This is interesting. We see here she's with Boaz, and she becomes pregnant. It tells us Boaz went into her. The Lord gave her conception. Now, I didn't think about this, or I guess I just never dwelled on this before or put 2 and 2 together. But here is God's hand in this story yet again. Was she not married to Milan for several years? More than one. I think I read somewhere, it's more than 7 years. Never had a child. Not one time did she conceive. And yet, she marries Boaz and has no trouble and bears children. Again, just another one of God's hands in things. I don't know why she didn't have children with Milan. And this kind of made me think, and sometimes I think and read too much into this, but while I was studying this, I could imagine Ruth, I wonder if she had some self-doubt, because what happens when you get married? When you get married, people automatically, immediately start saying, when are you going to have a kid? When are you going to have a kid? Well, 3 months go past, you're not pregnant yet? What's wrong with you? A year goes past, and don't be like us. It's been 3 years, okay? It didn't take. We waited. We didn't want a child right away. We waited over 3 years. And yes, we had people say, what's wrong with her? Is something wrong with Paula? Can she not get pregnant? What's wrong? And when I was reading this, and when I put those two together, that Ruth was married to Milan, which we knew, but I just never thought about, no children were mentioned, so I never thought about it. But could you imagine? People talk then just like they talk today, and I'm sure people were wondering, what is wrong with Ruth? Why hasn't she become pregnant yet? And she was married for years. So I wonder if there's some self-doubt in Ruth of, hey, maybe something is wrong with me. What did I do? Why can't I become pregnant? But we don't read any of that. We don't hear any of that. And we do have stories in the Bible where we hear the women say, something's wrong with me. Or why can't I have a child? Hannah comes to mind. She prayed for a son. She could not bear children, but she prayed for a son and God gave her a son. That's just one. There's many, many stories. I think of Abraham and Sarah. She was super, super old when she had a kid. She didn't bear children until very, very late in age. Again, it just made me think, that's something else Ruth had to overcome, was thinking something was wrong. And yet, again, I think it's God's hand as well. Or actually, I know it is, because we do not choose our gender of our children when we conceive. It's already done. And so, again, I think it's very interesting. She is married to Boaz. She gets pregnant, and immediately it's a son. It's not a daughter, it is a son, right off the bat, what everybody wants. And again, like I said, we have no choice over that. When you get pregnant, you get what you get. We don't have a choice over that, and neither did Ruth. But again, I thought all that was interesting. So maybe if she did have self-doubt, which I'm reading into that, there's nowhere that says it. I didn't read it in a commentary. That's just Paula's thinking, is if she did, maybe some of that fear went away. And maybe there's not anything wrong with me. But we see that. So I thought that was very interesting that she was married for years, couldn't have kids. All of a sudden she marries Boaz and bam, she can have kids. Then we see in verse 14, the women come to Naomi. They congratulated her on the birth of the baby. They do the same thing we did today. When someone has a baby, what do? We have baby showers. When the baby's born, before COVID, when the baby was born, we'd all run to the hospital and we would see the baby. We'd look in the nursery window. We'd want to hold the baby. Some of that has changed now because they're not allowing people into the room with the baby until they come home. But when they get home, what do? You want to go over and you want to see the grandchild. And especially Naomi is she's the grandmother. Do you think you're going to keep the grandmother away from her first grandchild? There's not a chance. So these people are just doing what normal people do. There's a new baby. They're going to come and ooh and all over it. And Naomi has to be on cloud 9. She has to be. What grandmother wouldn't be? And just taking Naomi and just looking at how she has made a huge turnaround in this story. She left with her husband. Then she had to come back home. She left happy. She came back angry. Been angry. Has been up in a scheme, in a plan, whatever you want to call it, with Boaz. And now there's this baby, and she is full of joy. And I can just picture her smiling from ear to ear. And I think of grandmothers all the time because babies do that to us, don't they? You could be having the worst day and that baby can change it around just by looking at you, by smiling, by gooing, by whatever they do. And it automatically changes your day around. And again, this baby is a reminder that God never left Naomi. He was always there for her and he will continue to be there for her. Then we see in verse 17, they name the child Obed. And we also see that Obed is special because he's the father of Jesse, who, people are like, we may not know Jesse, but we do know his son David. We know a lot of stories about David. So Ruth may have not known, but she started a pretty, not generous, don't want to say famous, but started a well-known lineage here. And she had one of the most famous people in the Bible, David, in her lineage, all because she had this child, Obed. So then in verse 16, it says that Naomi took the child and became his nurse. Now, when I first read that, you thought, if you all know the Bible history, back then, sometimes the mom is not the nurse of the baby. But we all know Naomi is too old. She cannot bear children anymore. She's past the nursing stage. What this nurse means is she is primarily responsible for raising and nurturing Obed. He is her responsibility. She was to look after him. She was to raise him. And that is why we see in verse 17, the women say to Naomi, a son has been born to Naomi, not to Ruth, not this is your grandchild. A son has been born to you. Naomi literally did not have a son, but she is going to treat Obed like her very own. And again, this made me think too, when you're down and out, and again, it made me think of the grandmother aspect of it. I have heard more than once in my life, someone being down and out like Naomi, they think the world is all doom and gloom, and then they have a grandchild, and how it turns around. They now have something to live for. They have a reason to get up in the morning. They have, I don't know how to describe it. We've all heard stories like that. There's just a huge turnaround. And this is what Naomi is going through. And this child was a turnaround for Naomi because it's a connection to her husband's and the son that she lost. And just like any grandmother, that first grandchild is the most precious thing in the world. And I bet you can't find one grandmother that doesn't think her grandchildren are the most precious thing in the world. And that's exactly where Naomi is right now. So we're going to look at the last few verses, and it's just a genealogy, but I think we need to read it. So starting in verses 18, it says, now these are the generations of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. So when you read that, it's just a bunch of names. Unless you really get into the deep study of it, and I have not, and I will not go into that in this study. But to me, to a normal person, just someone that you're just going to, it's a bunch of names. Now, I recognize a few of these. We should recognize Boaz, obviously, because we just talked about Boaz. And like we said, we should know Obed, because that's his son. And then we should recognize Jesse a little bit and definitely know David. So we see in the genealogy, in these 18 through 22, in verses 18 through 22, that a very important man came about because of Ruth and Boaz. And that man is David. Without this story of Ruth, there would have never been a David. Unless God somehow figured it out a different way, there never would have been a David if we didn't have this transaction, this whole account, story, whatever you want to talk about, between Ruth and Boaz. David never would have existed. We know David did a lot in the Bible, and probably the most remembered story from the kids is David and Goliath, fighting the big giant. That's always been a favorite. So you think about how many accounts in the Bible would have been changed or never would have happened if David was never born. And again, I didn't stop and think about that. I just take it, there's the Bible, it's in the Bible, it happened. I don't think about the what if. It's right there, it happened. I'm not going to think, well, if this was different, it would have been this way. But that's what this kind of, I wanted to point out here is, what if Ruth never had a child? There's a possibility David would have never been born. Without them, none of this would have been possible. And most of us don't think about that when we think about the story of Ruth. If you were to come up, I guarantee you that if you would have went up to somebody at the beginning of this study, which we're on week 11, so 3 months ago, if you would have went up to somebody and said, tell me something about the book of Ruth, I don't think one of those people would have told you, oh, well, that's where David comes from. They're in the lineage of David. Without Ruth, we wouldn't have had David. That's not what you would hear of. You would hear probably Naomi, like the most famous, when she tells Naomi, I will not leave you, I'll go with you, yours is mine and mine is yours. That verse, I'm never going to leave her, your God's my God, and she stays with her. That's what most people are going to remember. They may remember that she lost her husband, but I have never, when I have studied Ruth, when I have been in classes about Ruth, all my years in church, that point has never stuck with me. I'm not going to say I've never heard that point, but that is not the first thing that comes out when someone says, hey, what do you know about the book of Ruth? Well, that's where David came from. I've never heard that. And as someone's main point when you ask what Ruth is. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And that's how we end. It doesn't end with a big old grand story. It doesn't end with, our fairy tales these days, happily ever after. It just ends saying this is where it is, and it cuts it off at David. It doesn't go on. So these 4 chapters of Ruth that we have looked at over the last 11 weeks, we have seen faithfulness from chapter 1, verse 1. And we have seen faithfulness from Boaz, Ruth, and Naomi. Not just 1, not just 2, but all 3 from the get-go. We have seen Naomi. We have seen faithfulness. Do we have the same faithfulness in our lives? They had trying times, but they never lost faith. Can we say the same? Naomi, she had faith to follow her husband at the very beginning to a different land because of a famine. She had faith. She had faith God would take care of her. She then lost her husband, still kept her faith, still chose to keep a daughter-in-law. She gave them the choice, but she didn't have to choose. She could have told them to leave, but she had faith with that one daughter-in-law. She had faith when she went back home. She had faith once she got home that Ruth was going to get married, to provide for Ruth, to protect her. She had faith when Ruth finally found Boaz. And now she has faith through her grandson, Obed. Same goes with Ruth. And this, to me, is another thing I was thinking about when I was doing this devotional. We have to remember Ruth was not a Christian at the beginning of the story. Ruth was a Moabite. Ruth did not. Ruth lived a pagan life. She worshiped pagans. She followed pagans all of her life. She did a complete turnaround. And I think this is a great example for people today. People who have never been in the church. They have time to change. They have time to come to church. They have time to change their lives, just like Ruth did. And because she changed her life, she was blessed. She found a guy that would take care of her. Not that her first husband didn't, but she found Boaz, her protector, her redeemer. And she was faithful throughout the whole thing. She was faithful to Naomi the entire story. She never left Naomi. She was faithful to Boaz. When Boaz said, you glean in this field and only this field, she was faithful to that. She did that. She was faithful to Naomi when Naomi sent her to the threshing floor to meet Boaz or to lay with him, or however you want to phrase that. She did exactly what she was told. She was faithful to Boaz when Boaz told her to leave and wait, that I'm going to take care of this problem. She was faithful. They all show faithfulness. Boaz was faithful. We see his, again, he was faithful as in protecting Ruth on the gleaning, or on the, while she was gleaning the fields. She never let anybody harm her. He took care of her. He fed her. He gave her water. He gave her more food than she needed to make sure she was taken care of and to make sure Naomi was taken care of. He was faithful, and he obeyed God's laws to the best of his humanly nature possible. He was a human. I'm sure he made some mistakes, but he tried to obey God's law to the fullest. Can we say the same? And even when things get hard, Boaz stayed faithful. Are we a Boaz when things get hard? Or do we bail and run? Are we a Boaz, Ruth, and Naomi that take Ruth and Naomi? They lost everything. They lost everything down to every person in their family, immediate family, husbands, children. They stayed faithful. They had plenty of opportunities to run. Naomi was in another city that they were worshiping pagans and all that. She could have turned and didn't. She stayed true to God. Can we say that? Can we say when times get tough that we're true to God? Can we say when times are good, we stay true to God? Are we living that example? Are we helping others? We see here as well, Boaz, Ruth, and Naomi were constantly helping others. And the thing that stands out to me is Boaz, remember, was worthy. Elimelech, Naomi's husband, was worthy. Ruth was called worthy. I guarantee you Naomi was worthy. Just because of the type of family and the people they are. Are we worthy? Can we wear the name worthy? If not, we need to figure out why not. And it's hard. Every day, it's one good thing. You wake up and every day is a new day. You can start over and make things right and do what you need to do to get your life right. And just that's the one thing I want to take away from this is the faithfulness. In four short chapters, all the things that happened in all three of these people's lives, and they remained faithful the entire time. So that is where we are going to end. I hope you all enjoyed this study. I hope some things were brought up that maybe were new to you, or at least made you think about some things, or maybe a different perspective of things. And the biggest thing for me, one of the biggest things is the trust by Ruth. She trusted Naomi, and she trusted her family when they left Bethlehem. Her trust never wavered when they came back. When she met Boaz, and then when she finally was able to have family of her own, her trust never wavered. Now, granted, she had two really good people to trust. Their trust never wavered either. They never did anything wrong to each other. So I want to be able to trust like Ruth. I want to be able to trust other people. And when they tell me they'll do something, to believe they'll do it. We have to remember, like I said before, that Ruth was not a God-fearing woman at the beginning. It was only after she met her husband, and when he died, and it was only her and her mother-in-law, that she became a true believer in God. So I want us to think, can I lead others to Christ like Naomi? Naomi and her husband and her sons changed Ruth's life. Can we do the same? Do I even try to do the same? We have opportunities every day. Every day. You can just walk out your front door, and I guarantee you see things wrong. If you even go, I don't know where you all live. But if you're in a subdivision, whatever you call where I'm at, when you're on a street with other houses, you can walk down the street and see things that are unchristian like, unchristian things going on. That's just the world. That's the world. But what am I doing about it? Am I leading the Christian life like I'm supposed to lead and standing out against that? Or am I just falling right into it and participating with them? And that's a whole nother subject for our time. But my point is, all you have to do is open your door. Open your front door. Typically, unless you all live out in the country and in the woods, which we did for several years, and this was a little different. I wouldn't be giving this same speech if I was still in the house in the country. But if you live in the city, all you have to do is open your front door and you see things. So are you a trustworthy person like Ruth? Are you trustworthy like Boaz, as you keep your word? When you say you'll do something, you do it? Are you trustworthy like Naomi, and you take people in and you lead them to Christ? All things we can do. Are they easy? No, but we can all do them. So like I said, thank you for listening to this series, and I will see you all next week. And I'm not sure what it's going to be about, but I will see you all here next week.